This is Oakrist, the goblin cleaver.
A famous blade, forged by the high elves of the West. My kin. May it serve you well.
And this is Glamdring.
The foe hammer, sword of the King of Gondolin. These swords were made for the goblin wars of the first...
I wouldn't bother, laddie. Swords are named for the great deeds they do in war.
What are you saying? My sword hasn't seen battle?
No, actually, sure, it is a sword. More of a letter opener, really.
Let me ask you a question that's been bugging me, and that has to do with the presentation. We saw this at separate screenings, and mine was one of these 48 frame per second 3D screenings, which is the way Jackson intended to make the film, and the way he shot the film, and then it's projected at 48 frames per second as well. I had honestly forgotten this when I went in. That's the complete truth. I had forgotten it. I was just crossing my fingers we weren't going to get it in 3D. That's all I was worried about. Once they handed me the glasses, I thought, oh, well, all right, I'm seeing The Hobbit. I'll sit down and enjoy it. From the first second, something was off to me visually. And there were two elements to this. One, which I haven't heard talked about a lot, so maybe it was just me or just our particular screening, was that the action seemed sped up. Characters seemed to be moving almost in fast motion. Not in every scene, but even in scenes where a character would pick up a cup. There's this big dinner at the beginning with all the dwarves in Bilbo's house. It would seem like they were picking up the cup too quickly. I found that very distracting. And there's also this look that 48 frames per second has that some people have described as daytime soap opera or British television. I believe it was Dana Stevens in her review on Slate described it really well and made sense to me in that there's almost too much realistic detail in that you notice these are sets in a way that you didn't earlier.
It's like the uncanny valley, or is that what they call it when you start?
Yeah, something like that.
So
it's somewhere
that
in between.
Is off.
Yeah, and so I know you saw it in the regular projection, and I'm just wondering if you picked up on any of this, or if you had a completely different, purely visual experience.
I'm guessing I had a different, purely visual experience. As you said, mine was in 3D, and I don't think that added to the film at all. There were many times where I was watching and you would see a character and it's so clearly in 3D that they are completely cut off from their background. It looks like just a big head and shoulders completely separate from their environment. And I would look at that sometimes and wonder, why? Why do I have to see it that way? Why is this calling attention to itself in this way and completely distracting me from what I'm looking at? So the 3D didn't add anything for me here, but it doesn't sound like it was nearly as distracting as it was for the 48 frames per second folks.
Well, here's my question then, because I did enjoy all those other elements of the film that I talked about, yet I clearly had this presentation getting in the way. So is it fair of me? How much am I supposed to hold that against the film? I mean, I've honestly been struggling with it because if this was the only way to see The Hobbit at 48 frames per second, I don't think I could give it a positive review. Mm-hmm. I was only able to look past it, figuratively, not literally, because I knew that the majority of theaters in the country are going to be projecting it traditionally. At the same time, I couldn't make it to a second traditionally projected screening. I really wanted to make the comparison. So I don't know that I would enjoy it that much more, but I was kind of inventing this positive experience for myself that I couldn't have because of the projection. And the other question is this like, are we having a conversation that's similar to what was happening with the advent of sound or color, where we just need to catch up to this reality? Or is this just really bad technology?
That is the question. And until more people see it in 48 frames and until that becomes more common, I don't think there's really any way we can know. You're absolutely right. It's going to have to be something that becomes a little bit more widespread. I do want to bring in our poll results from last week because you're giving Peter Jackson a pass here, despite the fact that the visuals were clearly his decision and his decision alone. But last week on the show, when we posed our poll question and we said, hey, Guillermo del Toro was originally attached as the director of this project, and then Peter Jackson took it back over. Is that a good thing for you? Are you glad that Jackson's back, or would you rather seen what del Toro did with the project? We both said we would have rather seen what del Toro did.
Right.
And it turns out 67% of our listeners also voted for del Toro, and I certainly don't want to judge the film I would have rather seen. I'm looking at the film Jackson gave me, but I think this gets to this issue of never really getting swept up in the story. As I think about that poll, I wonder if del Toro would have been able to find a way to bring some of the fear and dread to it that you get in his other films that I think The Hobbit needed, something beyond just the spectacle that Jackson gives us, because that's what I really think we get, is just the spectacle. I do think that this is cartoonish in a bad way. Cartoonish without the sight gags and clever humor. The 3D, which I touched on, wasn't very good, and the CGI combines to make it look so artificial that in the fight scenes in particular, I didn't really feel it sped up at times, but there are a lot of fight scenes and no real sense of danger to them whatsoever. The technology here just makes it seem so fake that it actually reminded me of the sequences in King Kong. Sequences that otherwise derailed a pretty good Peter Jackson film, or a movie I thought that was pretty well on its way to being a good Peter Jackson film. Those are the ones with the dinosaurs and the big bugs, and they're just shooting guns everywhere. It's just total chaos. A lot of splatter, a lot of pretty colors and chaos, but no real wonder or investment. And that's a little bit how I felt watching The Hobbit.
Yeah, I don't know. Like you said, it's hard to say. I think those are the strengths of Del Toro, and he would have punched those up. I also would say that those elements of dread and fear are very much in the Gollum sequence I talked about. So I do feel that there is that sense in The Hobbit.
Small part of the film, though.
I will
overall.
also say, yeah, and what it revealed to me when I think about, why I was more excited about Del Toro taking it on is because of the possibility of something new. And I think what this just revealed to me is maybe I'm just, not one of those Hobbit fanatics. I never really thought I was, but I did really love the Lord of the Rings films beyond what I probably would have guessed. And maybe the Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey is just showing me I've sort of had my fill of this.
Well, on that note, The Hobbit is out now in wide release. If you see it and agree or disagree with our takes, you can email us feedback@filmspotting.net.